Good afternoon, Realtors. This is Nick Romitis, CEO of South Carolina Realtors, and welcome to this month's Broker Update. We're pleased to have you join us this afternoon. This session will be recorded today and will be made available to you a little bit later this afternoon. With me today, I've got a few members of our SCR team. We have Alan Likely, our CFO, Lindsay Jackson, our Chief Advocacy Officer, Byron King, our General Counsel, and Austin Smallwood, Director of Regulatory and Legal Affairs. So we've got a few updates for you this afternoon, and we're going to have a little bit of time, I believe, to answer your questions. So from a protocol standpoint, look in your control panel under the questions tab, and if you have any questions as we go through this today, please submit them, please type them in there, and we'll do our best to answer them either during the webinar today, or we'll contact you after we're done. So let's get started. Austin, you're first. What updates do you have for us today, Austin?
Thanks, Nick. Wanted to talk to everybody today about the new listing agreements that became effective May 1st. Those are available now on our website, as well as all of our various forms providers. If you're having any issues finding those, feel free to give us a call on the hotline or shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to try to assist you. So we updated 3 listing agreements. We updated the 210, which is our exclusive agency listing agreement. That's the one that allows the seller to also continue to market the home along with you. 220, which is our exclusive right to sell, our normal one, 220, and then we also have 221, which is the exclusive listing agreement, which is the transaction brokerage agreement.
So, Austin, I'm sorry, my phone's right here. I don't know how, it's not stopping. Austin, why don't you try that one more time? My apologies, everyone.
Okay, absolutely. So 3 listing agreements have been updated: 210, 220, and 221. So the one that allows you and the seller to both continue to try to sell the home, 220, where all sales have to go through you, and 221, which is the exclusive listing agreement if you're doing transaction brokerage. We did not update the commercial listing agreement because commercial is not a part of clear cooperation policy, so that was not included in this update. So the main parts of the updated listing agreements that were included was to take out redundant language regarding paying of cooperating brokers, take out some language regarding maintenance of window screens, and then mostly the 2 options under MLS. So there are 2 options going to be available to you now. Option 1 is that, hey, we're going to publicly market the property. We will then choose whether or not we want to put it on websites and IDXVs, but we will agree that we're going to do public marketing. In agreement with that, we're going to follow whatever our local MLS rules are. So make sure that you are aware of those. If you aren't aware of what they are, call your local MLS director, email your local MLS director, get those rules, figure out what their policies are, when do they require that property is on the MLS. Option 2 is that we're not going to do any public marketing. That extends to you and the owner of the property. So that is, we're not going to put a sign in the yard. We're not going to put it on Facebook. We're not going to put it on any other services. It's going to be an office exclusive. The only people who are going to know about this property are those with inside of our brokerage firm. And your MLS may require that you fill out a form stating that you're keeping as an office exclusive. If they do, make sure you fill out that form in compliance with that. So a couple of questions I've gotten on the listing agreement are, hey, this was effective May 1st. I have a listing agreement that I signed last month, so I need to go back and update all my listing agreements. You do not. And as a general rule, unless there's some sort of reason we tell you because of a statutory change, you do not need to go back and sort of change your forms once there are new ones in, where there is no sort of grandfathering that's required. Your old ones are grandfathered in, I apologize. So you do not need to go back and change them, but you make sure going forward that you would use the new one. We always recommend, in compliance with our policy, that you use the most up-to-date form. The other question I've gotten is regards to that marketing section that was changed, the one that is now called marketing after accepted offers. All we did was change the title on that. That is the same verbiage that has been there for years. So all that is saying is that if your seller if you want to continue to market the property after you have an accepted offer, you just need to do that with the seller's permission. So all you need to do is just send your seller an email that says, hey, we're now under contract for 123 Main Street. Would you like me to continue to market the home? If they send you an email giving you permission, then that's all you'll need to do to be in compliance with that paragraph. Otherwise, no real major changes out of it. We try to give a couple more spaces in there, but mostly the big changes to make sure that you're looking at paragraph 13 in 14, whichever one it is in your particular listing agreement for that MLS and public marketing section. Were there any questions on that, Nick, first, before I move on to my next topic?
No, real quick, where can members find the new forms?
So they are on our website. We updated those. I send them directly to .loop, DocuSign, and Zip forms. So, and they already become in your forms library. You do not have to upload them yourselves. They are already in those particular forms libraries. If you're having trouble finding them with those particular forms providers, either shoot me an email or give your forms rep a call, and they should be able to help you find them.
Thank you, Austin. I added the link to our forms page in the chat box. What's next, Austin?
So still want to go talk about a few things that are coming up with COVID and our contract issues. Reminder again, the best thing that we've seen is using due diligence. That's going to give you the most flexibility as both a buyer's rep and a seller's rep, because things are constantly changing. That's going to allow your buyer to do potentially more inspections than they would want to do normally. It's going to also not obligate your seller to fix anything. Also make sure that you're making deadlines as long as possible, understanding that, hey, it may take more time to get into a home, it may take more time to get inspectors, things of that sort. A reminder that there is no sort of eject button in our contract except for the right to terminate under due diligence. So just because someone doesn't want to buy a home anymore, just because someone can't get out because of quarantine, there is no automatic right to sort of eject from our contract. If it takes two parties to enter into a contract, it takes two parties to exit a contract. The biggest thing, again, is to also be sure that you're not using any sort of addendum that you find online or any addendum that you find on a Facebook page. If there's an addendum, a COVID addendum that you find, you need to make sure that you have your client, regardless of whether it's the buyer or the seller, have their counsel review that. And then you need to make sure that you're not providing any sort of legal advice on it. Simply providing a form that you find online could easily be construed as unauthorized practice of law, which is a felony.
Great, thank you, Austin, for the update. We may have some questions for you here at the end, so stay tuned. Alan, you're up next. What do you have for us today?
I'll give a quick little update on the PPP loan program. As many of may have seen in the news and different social media outlets, that some companies are refraining from spending the money and waiting for further guidance from SBA and Treasury. And so over the weekend and on Tuesday night, 6 new additional QAs were added to the FAQ's program for the PP. And I'll address 2 of those that may impact some of our members. Question 43, the safe harbor deadline was moved from today to May 14th. This is allowing to hopefully provide more guidance for applicants who have received the loan to determine if they actually do qualify for the loan and if they will be also eligible to be fully reimbursed. And then it's also during this time frame for the next 7 days, what you might want to do is also reevaluate your certification that the current economic uncertainty makes the loan necessary to support your ongoing operation. If you have adequate liquidity, you should maybe consider returning the loan before May 14th with no harm, no foul due to the safe harbor deadline. Then moving on, question 40 is guidance on laid off employees who refuse to be rehired. So if before you received the PPP loan, you laid off some employees and then you received the PPP loan and you went back to rehire them to help make them eligible for your PPP loan reimbursement, and then they decide not to come back on staff because they're getting paid more on unemployment, as long as you have a standard letter issuing a job opportunity to the former employee, then you can include that as part of your forgiveness for the reimbursement. And what can also happen to the employee who turns down the job offer, they could potentially lose their unemployment. So there could be an issue for some employees there that do not know this yet. So, and then just moving along, some common practices that I've read in different CPA forums and different best practices is that many people are, when they receive the loan, is opening up a separate account to maintain the loan within that one account. And then as withdrawals are made, it's fully documented as to what that money is going to be spent on, and a secure audit trail is provided. So that's some good notes there. And then also, this released yesterday, there's a bipartisan group of 19 senators that has asked Trump administration to lower the payroll threshold from 75% for the forgiveness of the loan to 50%. Lindsay Graham, our senator, is also included in this group. I've yet to receive any updates on what is going on, what the particular outcome may come of this. There are some other small business groups that are also asking for more use of the money than just payroll. So, and then there is another update that IRS guidance has released, Notice 2020-32, to explain that a taxpayer that receives a loan through the Paycheck Protection Program is not permitted to deduct expenses that are normally deductible under the code, to the extent the expenses were reimbursed by PPP loan that was then forgiven. Basically saying that any expenses that you have that you use PPP loan money on that was forgiven will not be deductible. Then Tuesday, the Senate introduced a new bill to help basically overwrite the IRS language and to make it so that all expenses are still tax deductible regardless of the PPP loan. And moving forward, I guess a quick little update on the mortgage is that the minimum FHA loan credit score is close to about 660 currently right now. And also the if you want to get a cash out refinance mortgage application for a conventional loan, your minimum FICO score is close to 740. And then also JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, and Chase have all elected not to continue their HELOC program, and it's temporarily suspended until further economic development is provided as to the future of that marketplace. So that kind of concludes my update. Nick.
Great, thank you, Alan. That's a lot of great information, and I know if any of the brokers on the call need any follow-ups to any of that, please don't hesitate to reach out to our staff after the webinar today. I've got a quick update regarding the NAR legislative meetings. Normally, this is the time of year where we're preparing to go to Washington, D.C. Typically, 125 or so realtors will make the trip to Washington to engage in the NAR committee and governance process. We love the Hill visits where we meet with our congressmen and use that time to advocate on those issues that are important to all of our members in South Carolina and across the country. Well, this year, because of COVID-19, the meetings have gone virtual. I'll add the link to for the registration in the notes in the chat below. And if you haven't registered, or if you've never attended a Washington, D.C. NAR meeting, I would strongly encourage you to sign up. There's no cost, and participate in one or two of the meetings. The big general sessions are next week. Committee meetings started this week, and it will really, I think, provide you with an eye-opening experience into just how big NAR is and just how many different issues and things that they cover and how they speak for us as an industry in our nation's capital. So please, I'll add that link in just a second. It's legislative.realtor, and we'll be participating in all that next week. And one last note, our Hill visits have gone virtual too. So we will be meeting with all of our congressmen next week. You'll be getting a registration link by email later today. I believe the weekly email is going out. And I encourage you to participate, to hear about the issues that we're advocating for at the national level, and urge and encourage you to participate in that process. So next up is Byron, our general counsel. Byron's been talking with, I know the attorneys that do, and has a few updates for us. Go ahead, Byron.
Thank you, Nick. Yes, exactly, on South Carolina due. So if you like getting your $600 a week from South Carolina Department of Employment and Workforce, every Sunday, you'll go to the SC due website and certify. You'll write that you're available for work. The attorney that Nick did the webinar with on SC Realtors YouTube channel, Attorney Todd Timmons of SC Due, said the #1 issue they're running into realtors that's keeping realtors from getting their $600 a week check is that they're putting they're not available for work on their Sunday certification. It cuts off your money through the algorithm. So please, 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 every Sunday, put this on your calendar, every Sunday, certify. It asks other questions too. Are you available for work? Yes. Are you getting other monies? You've gotten your PPP, your EIDL, other monies, you'll disclose that there. So if you like getting your $600 a week, every Sunday you'll certify on your SC Due website. And we're getting some calls on the hotline where people are having good luck talking to SC Due customer service reps, but also some, they can't get through. So you can also contact your elected officials and have their staff try to help you out with that. So topic number 2, if you like not getting sued about vacation rentals, we're coming into vacation rental season in South Carolina. Keep in mind, you've got the Vacation Rental Act. So in the seller's disclosure form 230, hey, it asks if there's leases, short-term, long-term leases. In the contract, the buyer certifies that they've had time to investigate leases. And like Austin said, use due diligence. The Vacation Rental Act is designed to make sure that vacationers coming to South Carolina still can get in their vacation rental and enjoy the summer in South Carolina. So part of the contract, you've got to disclose when that property is rented. And then within 14 days of the deed being recorded, you got to disclose who the property manager is, and the property management agreement transfers as well as the lease. And then for the next 90 days after the deed's recorded, the new buyer has to honor those vacation rentals. So make sure you, if you're listing, you get your seller to get all that information together so you can disclose it up front, maybe even in the MLS. On the buyer side, find out what your buyer wants to do. If they want to live there, that could be a problem. There's vacation rentals. Obviously, they're investors and want the money. Good to go. And if you violate this, you and the seller could get sued for damages and attorney's fees. Third topic, COVID-19 open houses. So open houses are legal in South Carolina. Use good judgment, follow CDC guidelines. Vacant open houses are probably a little bit safer than not vacant houses. Limit the number of buyers, keep your social distancing. Look at the CDC guidelines on face coverings, hand sanitizers, gloves, booties, cleaning up in between showings. And get written instructions from your seller exactly how you want to do those open houses.
Hey, Byron, let me jump in there real quick. I was reading this week a couple of innovative practices where brokers are live streaming open houses. So they'll advertise that they're having an open house on such and such a date at such and such a time, and providing a live stream to an audience and walking through the house and answering questions, and kind of an innovative way of doing a virtual tour. So keep in mind, the brokers, innovate during this time. NAR encourages virtual options if possible, but use your good judgment and don't be afraid to experiment with some of the new technology out there.
Yeah, great points, Nick. So in summary, we got the SC Due. Sunday, you're going to recertify. Open houses, use technology. Vacation rentals, you get the sellers to disclose and buyers to think about. And then wrapping up, NAR just released an update to their fair housing on COVID-19. So some critical points to remember. Treat everybody the same is probably the safest, the golden rule. It's probably the safest thing to do. Remember, COVID-19, some people, fear people from other countries. National origin is a protected class under fair housing. And some attorneys are opining that perhaps COVID-19 could meet the disability protected class. So don't discriminate, provide reasonable accommodations. Nick just talked about the #1 reasonable accommodation, using technology, virtual showings, virtual tours. You can ask people if they've had risk factors for COVID-19, but always ask everyone. Keep that in writing, and treat everybody the same is a good thing to do. Remember, you're not required to risk your life, and call the hotline with any questions on SC Do, open houses, Vacation Rental Act, and COVID-19 fair housing. That wraps it up, Nick.
Thank you, Byron. And as a quick follow-up, NAR just released a fair housing coronavirus. Let me start over. NAR just released a COVID-19 fair housing FAQ. It's attached in the handouts in your control panel, and it's again, it's at the coronavirus website of NAR. I'll post that in the chat as well. So check that out and make sure that you're following the recommendations as issued by NAR. So next we have our Chief Advocacy Officer, Lindsay. Lindsay, what's going on at the State House next week?
All right, thanks, Nick, and hey, everyone. Hope y'all are doing well. My update's going to be kind of quick today. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what the governor's office has been doing, and then kind of briefly go over what the legislature will be doing in the coming weeks. So as I'm sure y'all have all been watching the news and seeing that the governor continues to relax his executive orders regarding stay at home. His latest orders allow for outdoor dining options. So we're slowly kind of reopening the state. We're hearing that within the next week or so that the governor is supposed to make his call on whether salons, barbershops, and spas will be able to reopen and what that's going to look like. We're also hearing that there is going to be a date set in the near future for indoor dining to reopen. So we'll be on the listen out for when that happens. Wanted to give everyone a quick update on the governor's Accelerate SC task force. If you'll remember from the last broker update we did, this task force was developed to make a plan to move South Carolina forward to do kind of like a phased-in revitalization effort. The task force includes members from various business and industry sectors, as well as members of the General Assembly. So yesterday, the task force met for the second time, the entire task force, and they heard discussions from the different subcommittees. So there were 5 different subcommittees formed out of this group, and they included response, protection, governance, resources, and information. So the kind of resounding theme from all the subcommittee updates was the need for increased broadband access across the state. A few of the specific things they discussed were education and how school districts have been using different delivery methods to make sure that students are able to get their assignments in, and using e-learning and trying to make sure that everyone has access to use these online tools. They talked a lot about telehealth, with people being pretty reluctant to seek in-person care. The combo kind of also jumped back to broadband with this, because for these visits to be possible, the patient would have to have the sufficient internet service to be able to conduct those healthcare visits online with their providers. The Hospital Association, the Rural Health Office, and Palmetto Care Connections talked a lot about their broadband maps and made those public. And then the group also talked a lot about the federal infrastructure bill and the possibility of there being significant funding for broadband in either phase 4 of the coronavirus legislation or in a separate bill. So the governor also released that the findings and recommendations from this group will be available on accelerate.sc.gov. It's also going to kind of be a one-stop shop for how to file your unemployment and any guidance regarding PPE or anything like that. So that has gone live. So kind of jumping into from here, a quick legislative update. I don't really have too much for y'all right now because the legislature just decided about a week ago that they were going to come back into session on May the 12th. A lot is still really unclear with what's going to go on when they come back. We've heard that they're going to come back in for 1 day. We've heard 3 days. We heard 2 weeks. It seems to change by the minute. So we do know that they are still, as of now, planning to come back in September to take up some of the larger issues. But what we do know right now is that when they do come back on the 12th, they will be looking at taking up the continuing resolution and the sine die resolution. The major thing that they plan to do that day also is to extend the sine die adjournment, which would generally be May the 14th. They're going to extend that out to May the 28th. This is going to give them a little bit of additional time to resolve their differences in the continuing resolution from the last time they met a couple weeks ago, and then kind of come together on a sine die resolution to decide when they are going to meet the rest of this year and to figure out what they'll be able to discuss. So we're hearing right now that there has been an agreement brokered on the Santee Cooper issue, which is why the continuing resolution did not pass when they met in session a couple of weeks ago. There seems to be a deal that's been worked out with some specific oversight provisions. So we'll see if hopefully that comes to fruition and they'll be able to go ahead and get that passed so that the state government can continue to function. Also of note, the Senate has put together a new committee that's going to be accepting recommendations from the governor's Accelerate SC task force. They're going to be looking at best practices for business operation, looking at safe harbors for potential COVID liability, continued workforce development, and addressing the increase in unemployment. So we expect there to be a lot of discussion on Tuesday or next Tuesday to see what's gonna go on, and y'all be sure to stay tuned for my legislative update at the end of next week so I can provide y'all with some more information on what happened and where we'll go from there.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. And Austin, before we get to the questions, do we have any new updates from the Real Estate Commission?
The only update I would have would be that they have started doing renewals. They started May 1st doing renewals. You do have that extended deadline till the end of September, but if you want to go ahead and get it in early, they are now accepting renewals.
That's great. And let me remind folks too that I've gotten a couple of calls from a few members who had a little extra time on their hands and decided to take their 10 hours for the next cycle now, and only to find out that they can't carry those hours over into the next cycle. So while education is the best investment you can make in yourself and in your agents, make sure that they aren't trying to hoard up those hours and trying to carry those over, because they won't carry over. As of September, I guess there'll be a new education cycle, right, Austin?
Right, yeah, it would be it's every 2 years. I would assume that would renew once the cycle starts again.
Right. And and don't assume that the license renewal cycle is based on any kind of alphabetical formula. Make sure your agents check their licenses and make sure that they don't have any surprises in case they are up for renewal this year. So let's get to the questions. We've got a couple of pre-submitted questions, and let's start with Austin. There seems to be some confusion, Austin, on the clear cooperation policy. If, for example, if a listing agreement was procured on, let's say, May the 15th, but not put in the MLS until the 20th because the agent was waiting on photos or whatever else they needed to prep the property for the listing, is that a kind of a MLS by MLS issue? They'll have to see what their local rules are, or do you have any advice on how to handle that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why in that paragraph 13, there's multiple times it says make sure that you're in compliance with your local MLS rules, because depending on what MLS you're in, the answer to that question would be completely different. Your MLS may require that you have to put your listing in within so many hours of you getting it ratified, regardless of regardless of when you plan on publicly marketing it, or they could have a public marketing date. So the key is to know what your local MLS rule is. And be in compliance with those. And if you have any questions on a specific transaction, to refer that to your local MLS director.
Thanks, Austin. Byron, we talked a little bit about vacation rentals and open houses, but we had a question from a broker asked if does SCR have or would SCR provide a vacation rental addendum. How would you recommend a broker handle that?
Right, so we can refer that to the forms committee to study that. We just had some property managers, like Austin was talking about updating the leases. We get some feedback on that. But all you have to do is just get a printout of when it's rented from the seller and provide that to the buyer prior to contract. Get something in writing from the seller about who their property management company is. Get that to the buyer's side within 14 days of the deed getting recorded.
All right,
So it could be a simple email.
One question we had was regarding the PPP loan program and what are the specific guidelines for forgiveness. Alan, I think you covered that in your remarks earlier. We're waiting to see, I know NAR has sent letters to the Treasury and to the SBA asking for some, basically to hurry up and get this guidance out as soon as possible.
CPA, the CPA groups as well, has done it with recommendations of how to calculate the loan forgiveness as well.
Good. All right, so let's go to the live questions that we have here today. And so Austin, here's a question for you regarding the changes to the listing agreement and the clear cooperation policy. How do sellers agree to abide by the MLS rules? There's a statement in there that says that the seller is going to abide by the rules. How do agents explain that?
Essentially, the way you would describe it is explain to them, hey, our MLS requires that if we publicly market it, it's got to go in the MLS. Or if we're not going to publicly market it, if we're not going to put in the MLS, we're not going to put a sign in the yard, we're not going to put it on Facebook. And you also can't direct me to do it. I'm not going to violate my MLS rules to do it. As NAR's current position, as has been explained to me, we are working on getting clarification, is that the policy does also include sellers. But essentially, you would just say, hey, that I'm not going to take any action to violate the MLS rules, and that's sort of, you can't direct me to do it. And we're kind of, we can't get around the rule and say, well, the licensee is not going to put in the MLS, they're not going to market it, but I'm going to put it on my Facebook page. But we understand that may be somewhat difficult to enforce.
Well, and in my mind, Austin, it's very similar to the prospect of explaining agency to a client, right? There's rules and regulations that that revolve around those agency relationships, and this is one that NAR has put out there that I think will generate some discussion. I mentioned earlier the NAR legislative meetings. The MLS policy committee will be meeting this week, so that'll be a good one to listen into to see what other brokers have discussed or are discussing on this issue. We have another question regarding the clear cooperation policy, Austin. And with the new rule to either use the do you think it's enforceable? It says it certainly allows our MLS to control advertising for our listings, and I don't think that's the premise or the rationale behind the rule. But Austin, as far as enforcement, what have you heard from local MLSs and their ability to enforce the rule?
I mean, it's clear cooperation is now part of your MLS rules. It's an NAR nationwide policy. The reasoning behind it was actually based in fair housing, was to say, hey, we're going to have either properties available to everyone, or you're going to do an office exclusive. We're not going to sort of have it available to some and not all. In regards to that, is part of your MLS rules that you agreed to abide by when you became an MLS member. And so if you have any questions on that, that would be directed to your local MLS director, but I imagine they would enforce that like any of their other rules.
Lindsay, we've got a question for you. Any movement on the business license tax reform? Has COVID-19 killed that for this year? Where are we?
Well, we are not dead yet, so that is a positive right now. We are in conversation with Senate leadership. If everyone will remember, this bill has passed the House, and it was before all this happened, was about to go to the Senate Finance Committee for their consideration. We're talking with Senate leaders right now of the possibility of possibly polling it out on the floor if they stay in session long enough. And if they aren't in session for more than a couple of days next week, I'm still discussing the possibility of having it brought up in September. So we're hopeful, we're still working on it, and we'll be sure to keep everyone apprised as we do have more information on that.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. We have a question about whether or not SCR has a form regarding some of the issues that you addressed, Byron, earlier regarding, pre-qualifying or screening potential clients for COVID-19 and related issues. And the answer to that simply is no, we don't have a form. That's going to be a broker by broker policy decision on how you address that. And I think it would be too much for SCR to kind of get into your business, so to speak, of telling you how to screen clients and customers. That's certainly going to be up to you to address on an individual basis, and depending on your market and depending on what's going on in your community. Any other comments to that, Byron or Austin?
Yeah, I agree with you, Nick. I would also say with asymptomatic people with COVID-19, I've heard attorneys say, hey, you've got to assume every consumer is a COVID-19. So asking questions, a piece of paper is not going to keep you safe from the disease. So just be careful out there and be safe.
Yeah, and sorry, I would add three things. If you're going to do one of these policies or have these forms, the first one is it needs to be drafted by an attorney, not by you. And then the form needs to be facially neutral and it needs to be uniformly enforced. So it can't be, we're only going to give it to some or others, or one agent in our office is going to do it and others aren't. If you're going to have it as a brokerage policy, then it needs to be given to every single person, regardless of any protected class or what type of property they're looking at. And it needs to make sure that the form is facially neutral, does not have any sort of discriminatory language in it.
Thank you, Austin. That was a very scary update, but factually correct. I agree with you. This is just like any other policy you would enforce in your office. It's got to be imposed in a neutral manner. A question about CE classes, and maybe Austin, this is a question for you. What if a realtor takes CE on in July? Would that count for, and their license renewed in this cycle in June? Does the extension to September mean they have to wait till after September to take education for the next cycle?
I haven't seen anything on that one way or the other. I would probably direct that to the education staff at LOR. Joy and her team are usually very responsive and good at getting that sort of information to you. And if you're not receiving anything from them, shoot SCR staff an email and we can reach out to staff for you.
Yeah, we'll reach out to Rod over there and we'll get an answer for you. Austin, that question was submitted by one of our local association AEs, so we can send an update out on that real quick. And the last question that I have in the queue, oh no, sorry, that was the last question in the queue. So we've got, I want to say thank you to, we have 102 brokers that participated in the call today. Any closing thoughts or remarks from any of the panelists today?
Call the hotline.
Stay tuned for the legislative update next week.
All right, well, don't feel like you have to say something. We will wrap things up today. I do want to tell all the brokers that we are going to go to a monthly schedule for these updates. Next month, we're very pleased to have Real Trends Steve Murray with us to talk about a little bit about what's happening in the brokerage community across the country and the response to COVID-19 and the impact on on the industry and on businesses. And in future months, we're looking to have other guest speakers and are looking for your input. If you would email me, if there is a potential webinar presenter, speaker, instructor that you would love to hear from, please let me know. And we'll reach out to them and see if we can't get them scheduled for the sessions in the months ahead. So in the meantime, stay safe, stay realtor strong, and we'll be back with you next month. Thank you.